With the current issue of RAM becoming, well, what it is, I figured this would be a great opportunity to talk about old PCs. And what better way to talk about old PCs than by explaining exactly how well Linux runs on them. And it is known for bringing old PCs back to life. So rather than trying to build the latest and greatest of all computers with newer components, why not just look to the past and try to use what we can rather than use what's new. Now, I do understand that this is much easier said than done, but still, it is something to be said nevertheless. The one thing we do not have is an easy template to choose from. So, leaving the hardware aside, I am focusing mostly on software because, with the current state of things, hardware is hard to come by regardless. So finding a decent GPU, enough RAM, and a CPU that can run things is going to be a problem. But finding them at a pawn shop or a secondhand market might be a bit easier. So I figured, why not think of those first? Now, the main thing I have personally run into, and I've heard a lot of people run into, is where to start. Where to start whenever you're choosing a Linux distribution, because that is essentially what we're doing, choosing a Linux distribution. Personally speaking, I can say go with anything Debian based, which means that the base system is running off of Debian Linux and just building upon that alone. But from other people's experience, they can definitely say one is better than the other, but this is supposed to be a generalized guide to essentially helping you figure out which one suits you best. So for starters, I do have 3 primary websites to go to in order to actually understand distributions and choose which one might be better for you. The first one being DistroWatch. DistroWatch is essentially a catalog of all Linux distros in existence to current times that have been public and actually utilized by people. That makes it much easier to see how many distributions there truly are, and as well as the vast array of styles, just comfortability people have had in making different distributions. We have Hannah Montana and Justin Bieber OS, just for example. Why do we have those? Who knows, but I feel like we shouldn't be asking why we have those and why Ubuntu exists almost in general, because that is now permanently a part of my digital footprint that I've said that. DistroWatch aside, it does not technically help you choose a distribution, but it does help you understand the options you have for choosing a distribution. So let's move on to Distro Chooser. Distro Chooser is a website that guides you through a rather loose questionnaire to further direct you into which distribution is best for you based off of its current lifespan, mostly spanning from all of the distributions, but narrowing down what might best fit you with certain criteria. So if you have a priority of open source software versus proprietary software, they might have a better recommendation than I do. But if you would like to go through a more full throttle approach, it does also show you the most serious, most hardcore operating systems Linux has to offer. Although, fair warning, some of the communities are quite harsh whenever you don't read the documentation. And lastly, for those who just want to try Linux just because and just for the sake of trying Linux, we have Find Me a Distro, which is essentially pulling the lever on a slot machine and having some random distribution spat out as reward. Find Me a Distro is actually pretty interesting because it just says, hey, here's a random distribution. So it just takes you to the homepage and you can literally just read about it, look into it. It has a surprisingly large number of distributions and has been pretty consistent in showing me something rather random each time. Now, I know that this might be a lot, so we'll circle back to my original recommendation, mostly because those recommendations are Debian-based distributions. These distributions work off the core of Debian, and Debian has other distributions that are also well known, mostly known as Kubuntu, Lubuntu, and of course Ubuntu, which honestly has like horrible pronunciation for me, but it's whatever. Following off of that, you also have a very known, very popularized operating system known as Kali Linux, which is a penetration testing operating system, and I would not recommend that for a beginner whatsoever, but Parrot OS is a great alternative for those wanting to learn penetration testing and who would also like to know about basic Linux usage, because it does have a security, server, and home version, all still working off the main operating system of Parrot OS. Now, lastly, the main thing that people might get confused on is the desktop environment, mostly because that each desktop environment can be customized, interchanged, and is overall unique to each user, or just kind of plain across the board. These desktop environments will drastically change how your operating system looks almost overall, because a lot of them do have overlap, but not all of them are as easy to find. With that being said, desktop environments have a vast number, from tiling window managers all the way to your standard desktop environments with a graphical user interface. Those are pretty common, but those are also very much so beginner. So I definitely recommend sticking to those. If you'd like to try a tiling window manager, please, by all means, go ahead, but you will need to probably just get rid of your mouse entirely. Now, finally, the main 5 desktop environments I would suggest to anyone are KDE Plasma, because it is closest to Windows 7, GNOME, which is a good mixture of macOS and Windows, and honestly, it's one of the most popular desktop environments. And lastly, we have XFCE, Mate, and Cinnamon. Those 3 desktop environments are rather similar, but do have a few interchangeable things. Those 3 desktop environments are rather similar, but do have a few interchangeable things, and they all definitely have different themes and ways of setting up. So that's definitely a good place to start, mostly because that those are also very simplified and very much so popularized. So these are definitely things that are noted when taking. These are definitely things that should be taken into account when choosing a desktop environment if you don't want the default. Congratulations! From this point, you should have at least an idea of what operating system you'd like to start with, and have a relatively good knowledge of what desktop environment you might want to look into. If not for its simplicity, then maybe for its complexity. All of these distributions and links, websites, and everything that I've mentioned will be linked in the description below, because this is something that will actually help you if you do want to go the route that I might be going of buying old parts just to get a new PC. Definitely not something new, but probably might be something more necessary now than it was before. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions at all, please leave them in the comments below, because I may be trash at this, but I am still trying.